Students cannot learn anything if they're not paying attention. I've done, I want to say, over 2,000 interviews with teachers the last couple of years. Every single one of them admitted that student engagement was one of their biggest problems that they have. So I knew when I was having all these interviews that there was definitely a need for a more engaging type of engagement tool.
Welcome to the Engagement Architect podcast, where each episode we talk with fascinating people from different fields like education, entrepreneurship, neuroscience, the arts, and together we'll explore what they've learned about capturing attention, sustaining motivation, and creating experiences that really matter. I am your host, Chris Bennett. Today I'd like to talk about educational video games. Now they've been around for decades, but for the most part they really aren't that good. I found that normally they're either engaging the students or they're effective at learning, but rarely both. And this makes sense if you think about it. If you're working on a popular video game like Zelda, for instance, you're spending all of your time thinking about creating a compelling game experience. If you're teaching the player, it's only how to play the game better. You are trying to teach them how to transfer skills to the real world, which is its own big challenge. Engagement and entertainment is literally all you're doing. Now, if you're trying to teach something digitally, you're concentrating on things like pedagogy, lessons, scaffolding, maybe standards, all those things that make for effective learning. But if it's engaging, it almost happens by accident. And when you put those two things together, in my experience, one of them almost always takes precedent. Is it a fun game that happens to teach something? I think of apps like Duolingo. Or is it an effective learning experience that just happens to be fun? Now, with very young kids, educational games can be a bit easier because they don't have as much experience. They just want to have something fun. They may also have a love for learning. But with grade schoolers, middle schoolers, especially high schoolers, they have an entire digital world open to them, and they may not be as motivated about learning as we might like. So think about this. How is your educational game, likely created with a small team of passionate individuals, going to compete with a series of 30-second TikToks or a high-resolution video game that may have cost hundreds of millions of dollars to create with a team of several hundred people? And the answer is you really can't. A few years ago, I was working with a very sharp team on a platform called Kinjo, which was finding the learning in games kids were already playing. We assessed the top 600 Roblox games for learning potential, designed a rubric for tracking 21st century skills like creativity and complex problem solving, and developed an incentive-based reward system to get kids to spend more time in games that were better for them. And you know what? It actually worked. By showing kids the games they were playing and the skills they were practicing, along with small incentives, we were actually able to move the needle and affect their gameplay decisions. But Kinjo was really ahead of its time, I think, and product market fit was challenging. Most parents really didn't know what Roblox really was, much less that their kids could be practicing actual skills in it. But I felt like it was a step in the right direction of taking games that were already there and create a meta layer on top to track learning. So when I met our guest today and heard about his approach to this problem, I could immediately see that it was very different than anything else I had seen in the marketplace. So let's learn more about Skyler and his approach. Today, I am happy to welcome Skyler Scarlett to the Engagement Architect podcast. Skyler is a two-time Shark Tank TV show entrepreneur and the founder of GameClass, which is a global EdTech platform that transforms popular video games into powerful learning tools to solve learning engagement. Skyler has shared his insights on education and entrepreneurship at leading institutions, including UC Berkeley, Yale, and Columbia, and he's dedicated to making video game education accessible worldwide to help teachers and students discover new ways to learn. Skyler, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Chris, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to talk with you.
Great. So from our conversations in the past, it's clear that you have the entrepreneurial spirit, but I've never had a chance to ask you, where did it come from? What was your journey to where you are now?
I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs or business owners. So I do think it's interesting that I chose this path of entrepreneurship, and I did it right out of college. I was really close to going to physical therapy graduate school, but I had always had ideas in college, and I finally had an idea to do a cryotherapy business. And next thing you know, I was on Shark Tank, and I was in that industry for 10 plus years. After doing it for so long, it's really hard for me to imagine not being a part of a company building something. I love to build things. I love entrepreneurs. I love the atmosphere. I love the challenge.
Right. So before we dig into what GameClass is, and I'm super excited about that, what was the genesis? How did GameClass first come about?
Came from tragedy, to be honest. We had done a deal with LA Fitness. We put all this money into a location in one of their clubs, planned to do all of these locations. COVID happened. I was locked out of my business and I was playing video games again because I didn't have time during my cryotherapy wellness journey. And I was playing a multiplayer game where I realized, wow, every time we win, our communication's perfect. But when we lose, it breaks down, and these games are recorded these days. You could take this recording and this could be taught in universities. That's when I looked into, hey, I think everyone agrees that video game education works. There's no really debate. But why is it not more widespread? Why is it not more accessible? And then that's when I looked into, okay, they're building a lot of games from the ground up. But is there a better path forward to making video game education accessible? And my idea was, why don't we leverage the popular games? Half the work's done for us. That engagement that we all want, well, the kids and students are already engaged in all these games. So if we use the popular games and we figure out a way to really hone in on the learning aspect, that could be a real home run for a company.
Interesting. What hole in what schools are currently offering did you think you were hoping to fill?
I'm gonna admit something to you, Chris. I built something on an idea, which is like the worst mistake you can make as an entrepreneur. So I had to work really hard to go, what's the main problem we're solving? And I realized we were solving so many problems. What's the main one? And to me, it really is student engagement. Students cannot learn anything if they're not paying attention. I've done over 2,000 interviews with teachers the last couple of years. Every single one of them admitted that student engagement was one of their biggest problems that they have.
Okay, so let's start to dig into GameClass. For those who aren't familiar with it, give us an overview of what GameClass is, what it does, and how it works, what age range it's designed for.
GameClass can take any video game in existence. Typically, it's popular video games. There's no limits. And we built our own custom built cloud based editor that allows you to, within like 10 minutes, take our educational overlays and put them all around the video game play clip. So, our real secret sauce is using recorded game clips. You don't need a video game console, you can bring it into any classroom. We can cover any subject, and what we've learned is the adoption rate for teachers and educators is far greater than any other video game education platform. They don't need to learn how to create their own educational game. They can find a clip that we've already built for them and within 3 minutes engage their students in any type of classroom.
Interesting. So the students aren't actually playing the games, they're watching clips from games that have educational overlays on them. Is that correct?
They can play the game, but I think that would be more of an after school program or at home where if they're playing the game, they're using their own, they're pressing a button on their controller, recording their own gameplay. And then for the other students or their teacher or their tutor, they're turning it into a lesson. So I love that. I do think you learn so much by playing the game, but it's not accessible. Think about Worldwide, right? You can't bring Nintendo Switch or PlayStation into every classroom, and you can't give the student 30 minutes to really enjoy the game and record it. But you can take the recorded gameplay clips, look at Twitch. People love watching other people play video games. And when you see something that you're used to playing, there's instant personal investment, there's buy in. You can relate to the video game characters, the music, the sounds. You're already invested, and now you want to start asking questions about the learning aspect, the subjects.
Okay, so that takes care of one of the big points of friction, which is if I'm going to use Mario Kart, where do I get 30 TVs, 30 Nintendo Switches to use one device per student? You're talking about this is using recorded clips, and so you bypass all that.
Yes, I love these programs just to be upfront. Like Epic Games done a great job with the Unreal Editor and bringing it into classrooms, and same thing with Minecraft EDU. But you still need them in front of a computer playing the games. That means you're losing so many students, so many teachers. Teachers are very intimidated by that, but they're not intimidated by taking a clip and then quickly transforming it into education or just putting it in front of the classroom saying, okay, we didn't really understand that physics concept, but let's see how that physics concept looks in Mario Kart. That's so much easier, so much more accessible.
What about fair use? You're using clips from video games that people have purchased. What's the legal part around this?
If I wasn't an entrepreneur, I think I'd probably be a lawyer. So my mom's a lawyer. I grew up literally going to court. My mom always taught me the law's the law, whether you like it or not. So that's how I was raised. So before I did this, I looked into can I do this? I looked at Twitch. Twitch was interesting. What I found from Twitch was technically the gaming companies could go after them, but they choose not to. In my personal opinion, they don't go after them. But GameClass is different. We're an educational company. And fair use is how we use popular video games. So fair use has four main components. The first one is what's the use? Is it press, media, or education? Okay, easy. But the second thing is the most important, and it decides almost all the court cases that go there. Is it transformative? And the more transformative it is, the more likely it is to be fair use, regardless of if it's nonprofit or for profit. Now, GameClass is taking entertainment-based video games and transforming it into educational content. They're no longer even playing the game. It's not the same form anymore. We've completely made it into a different form. So that I think is the most protective thing that we're doing with fair use. And then three is how much of the copyright material are you using? Our average lesson is 30 seconds. Video games today are 80 to 100 hours long. And then fourth is what's the potential harm to the market? They'd have to argue that seeing video games in the classroom or learning from them would hurt them from wanting to buy the games, which what we've learned is parents are more likely to buy the video games. We're opening up video games to a lot of students and people that don't play video games that now are seeing them for the first time because they're seeing them in the classroom.
So, do you see game classes being primarily supplementary to a more normalized curriculum, or do you think it has potential to actually replace portions of current learning? How far are your aspirations going in that direction?
I'll be real honest. I see it as a supplemental tool. That's how we built it. I believe that the only time I ever have difficulty with an educator is when they want game class to be more than it needs to be. A lot of our lessons are short for a reason. My goal is that game class gets the students excited. They start asking questions. When you turn off game class or you take it off the projector, they're still into the subject matter. They're still excited. They're still into asking questions. So even a 30-second lesson can be a 20 to 30-minute discussion because they're asking so many questions about how the subject relates to the gameplay.
The lessons that I've seen, some of them are super applicable, like teaching physics using Mario Kart, to others which are doing more things like interrupting play to ask math questions out of context, right? You're always going to have this. Some lessons are literally better than others from an educational standpoint. Are you making any attempt to curate or guide people in any way, or are you just letting the cream rise to the top naturally?
Great question. I think one, we have a shared library that's free that I always want to keep free. Like you know how passionate I am about education, and I don't want to restrict what we're doing to schools or students or parents or tutors to people that can't afford it. So having a free resource always is super important to me. It's like YouTube, right? You have a mix of content. So we're working on a premium library, but everyone will have a lesson plan, standards attached, will be something that our company deems a majority of educators would use in their classroom. In fact, we have a classroom feature on GameClass where we can track when it's added to a classroom. So if a lesson keeps getting added to a classroom and it's working for most teachers, we'll figure out how to get that into our premium library. Eventually, I want to pay teachers. I want teachers to come on to GameClass and know they built something so undeniably good, we will buy it from them and put it in our premium library.
Okay. So let's dig into the engagement and motivation question, which is what the whole podcast is about. Why do you think this is so engaging to students? Is there any sort of secret sauce that you've been able to observe?
Oh, I mean, it's video games, right? Let's start before the education part. How engaging are video games? They outproduce film, media, TV combined. They're just so inherently educational and engaging, right? Like the colors, the music, the sounds. Even my daughter who's young, like if I show her game class videos, she's drawn to the video game clips in a way she's not drawn to TV and film. So I think there's something just about the way they're made that is already so engaging. And it's why you have kids and students who can play for hours and hours. They're so inherently engaging. And that's what we use.
Okay, so let's dig into something that may be a little bit generational. People who are more our age look at games typically as, well, you're either playing a game or you're not playing a game. People my age don't really understand Twitch or YouTube. Like, why would you go watch a video of somebody else playing a game? And it gets to the agency question, whereas younger kids that I see, they'll play Fortnite for 2 hours and their parents will tell them to get off the Xbox and they'll watch Fortnite videos because they're processing and they're learning. And parents and educators don't really get that. Because when you play a game, You have meaningful choices. That's part of what makes it a game, as opposed to watching a TV show or watching a movie or reading a book where you don't have that same level of choice. But that's being removed with Game Class because you're watching a video of a game being played and you're making choices based on that. Can you dig into that agency question a little?
I think you hit a point of I could have my daughter play video games or watch TV. I choose video games because she's making decisions. But keep in mind that we are still having them make decisions, right? We're pointing things out. We're having them fill out questions and quizzes. We have open-ended questions. We're going to add hotspots. For a brief period of time in video games, there were these games that weren't really video games. They're more stories, but they were interactive with choices you were making. I feel like Game Class is like that. And we have something called student projects. What happens is educators or Game Class prompt instructions behind a video game clip. Now the students need to take that video game clip and they need to use all of our tools to demonstrate subject mastery. They're doing the work, they're absolutely interactive. Someone make a project the other day, having them draw specific math equations and lines. But here's the thing, they love it because instead of doing that on a chalkboard or a whiteboard, they're doing it on their favorite video game. So they want to participate, but they're still extremely interactive. Are they holding a controller in their hand? No. So I think there's room for both. But again, we talked about how it's just not accessible to bring that controller into most classrooms or even homeschooling settings.
Okay. So kids that I've observed seem to have a really sensitive radar for experiencing, whether it's playing or watching a game for fun versus watching it for learning. And I've seen
Okay.
them tune out as soon as they know they've been given something that's supposedly fun inside of a classroom context. It's that sense of learning games can capture kids once or twice because they get to kind of cheat by playing games in class. But then often that engagement drops off pretty quickly once they realize I'm still in class. How does Game Class try to bridge that gap?
This is super important to us, and based on a lot of case studies, certain things we found is shorter is better. If you try to go too long, they definitely lose engagement for anything, right? So there's a reason why our average lesson is 30 seconds and really doesn't extend past 2 to 3 minutes. We can hold their engagement. Two, Game Class can change the game. If you're playing the same educational game, of course you get bored. If you play the same video game for fun, you get bored. But Game Class, when a new game comes out next week, we can use it. And now we have new lessons, new student projects. It's so incredibly powerful to be able to change the medium of what game we're using. And then there's things like we've learned transparency helps them feel like it's more in the game rather than on top. So we've learned a lot based on feedback. They do not like rapid pauses. So I've tried to train my own internal staff not to just do question after question after question. Space that out. Because you have to think if you were taking it, would it be boring to you? Would you lose engagement? And the truth is, if we're all honest, of course we would. No one likes the rapid pauses. So sometimes you need the lessons, the gameplay to lead. And other times for other students, maybe you do need more pauses. But Game Class is so personalized. So, when we talk about engagement, what I love about Game Class the most is we can personalize the engagement for the exact student. If they have something where they need a special attention in a certain area, we can do that. And we also have all the analytics to show you behind the scenes. So you can look at the data and say, okay, can we better make our Game Class lessons or projects to reach this student better?
Okay, so let's talk about takeaways for educators, educational staff, even parents. How did teachers approach this kind of question of creation and engagement? I see they're the ones who are mostly creating lessons using Game Class.
I think we found out that most teachers and educators were very exhausted. They worked really hard and they didn't have a whole lot of time to create. They said, you know what, we love this. We just want to use pre-built content. So I shifted about 6 months ago to really trying to create more in-house content for teachers. The problem I have is that I'm getting demand from all the subjects. It's not like we're just a math company or just a science company. That would have been easier. But I have to try to get all this content built for all these different subjects. And that's been a challenge that we're trying really hard to improve on. But everyone that's used my editor, I've heard so many people compare us to Canva. That is the biggest compliment in the world.
How do schools feel about Game Class, and what's the hardest sell if you're talking to, let's say, a superintendent of a school?
Companies have been coming to me wanting to use it because they understand the value prop really quickly. I think the biggest challenge is how slow, and people warned me about this, EdTech is in the US. Things move really slow because if you want to get into a public school, you have to go through a lot of different channels. Tech director, superintendents, the board, and even if they love something, some districts or schools may say, hey, let's pilot this in a year or 2 years. That's hard as an entrepreneur. I move really fast. People are always like, you're one of the fastest moving people we've ever worked with. So that's been the biggest challenge. But I really haven't had objections about using video games. In fact, I am so blown away by how quickly educators, even the non gaming ones, have been drawn to this. My easiest conversations are non gaming educators. Who would have thought that coming into this?
So obviously, no in-class solution is going to fill all needs. Just like AI is not going
No.
to magically solve classroom problems, neither will something like GameClass. But if you think about the core of what you do, what is like the specific role that you think GameClass has to fill in the average, very challenging classroom of today?
I think we are the best engagement tool you have access to that you probably don't know is out there right now. I don't think anything beats us because you just can't beat video games and you can't beat using their favorite video games. If you have students that you just try everything and you can't reach them, have you tried using their favorite video game? They probably have one or four, right? And if they're not a video game player, do they play mobile games? Those are video games. We can take their mobile games and same thing, we can reach them. I think reaching students where they're at is what most students want. How does this relate to my life? So I was a smart student growing up, but I was not engaged. I did not want to learn on a chalkboard or whiteboard. I didn't understand why do I need to learn probability or statistics? Well, when you're an entrepreneur, stats and data is everything, right? I didn't know that at a young age, but if you brought out Mario Kart and said, hey, do you want to know what the probability is you're going to get a green shell or something better when you're in fourth place? I'd have been just glued to my teacher.
So, finishing up, let's look ahead. If you look ahead to the next few years, where do you see engagement and motivation going, especially in the classroom or an educational setting? What really excites you?
I'm really excited about the personalization. I think in general, typically you have to adhere to 30 students, 50 students, right? A whole classroom. But with AI, with different tools like GameClass, now you can reach students that you couldn't previously. And with certain tools, like even the AI stuff we're doing, you can prompt a lesson into 10 languages. Now you have it for different languages, you have it for special needs, you can tweak it for certain engagement that you need. So I think the personalization, as far as engagement goes, is what I'm most excited for. For GameClass VR, I think VR is in very early stages, right? But give it 5 or 10 years, I think it's going to be some of the best educational experiences. I think about, flying an airplane, doing surgery, more like the career stuff that we can get into GameClass through VR. I'm really excited about.
Okay, so just to make sure we don't lose this thread, it sounds like a growth opportunity for you is using virtual reality where someone's going to put on the goggles that we may know of. A lot of people haven't had a chance to use them and watching clips of VR games with overviews on them.
I'm very bullish on that, but where I really, if GameClass is super successful, we need to find a video game company to believe in us. And here's why. If a big gaming company, it needs to be one of the publicly traded companies, in my opinion, if they have a GameClass mode in video games, now we have recorded game clips which are accessible, but now we have GameClass when you're playing the game. So I love the idea of they're playing Fight Simulator and all of a sudden they're flying around the pyramids in Egypt and a GameClass fact pops up. And they're learning like little flashcards in the video game. The setting can be turned on or off in the settings. So I think if someone buys in to what we're doing, it will be the more accessible way we're doing it with the recorded clips, but taking the educational aspects so much further by coding it into video games.
Okay. Well, Skylar, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. I love how you're finding opportunities for learning inside the games that kids are already playing and watching, which happens to be a huge passion of mine. And for our listeners, we'll have links to Skylar's work and resources in the show notes.
Thanks, Chris.
Here's what really struck me about my conversation with Skylar. For decades, we've really had two dominant approaches to digital learning. One is educational games, which can be fun when they work, but they're often built by small teams with limited budgets. They can't realistically compete with The Sims or Zelda. And second are educational videos from places like YouTube or Khan Academy. And those deliver content clearly, but they're passive. Students watch, maybe absorb, but they're not making meaningful choices. And GameClass introduces something different, which is a third lane. Students watch short clips from the games they already love, like Mario Kart, Animal Crossing, Fortnite, and those clips are layered with interactive learning prompts and even quick assessments. It's active, but it's also accessible. Teachers don't need consoles or expensive hardware or hours of class time. And Skyler's already heard from teachers who can use a 30-second clip to spark 20 minutes of real discussion and engagement. And that's a bigger lesson here about motivation design. Engagement doesn't always come from inventing something brand new and hoping people will buy it. It comes from meeting learners where their attention already is and designing ways to channel that energy towards meaningful outcomes. And that's what I think GameClass is trying to do. Not fight against the gravitational pull of popular games, but actually use it as a bridge into learning. And when I think about the future of motivation and engagement, whether it's in classrooms, workspaces, or even in our personal growth, that's really the challenge for all of us. Not just to build shinier tools, but to align with the motivations that are already live with people. Now, if you found this conversation useful, I'd love for you to subscribe to the Engagement Architect podcast. If you know an educator, a parent, a designer who struggles with the engagement problem, share this episode with them. I'm Chris Bennett. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.